Okay, today we'll be diving into part one of Jason DeLeon's The Land of Open Graves. And as we've heard, this book is an ethnographic study of the experiences of migrants crossing the US Mexico border. So we'll be taking a look at DeLeon's research methods, particularly how he uses ethnography to tell the story of migrants. And throughout the presentation, we'll focus on the key concepts and themes in his research and how they connect to the ideas we've been discussing in class. We'll also be looking at how DeLeon navigates the ethical and emotional challenges of studying vulnerable populations and the unique way he uncovers hidden stories through artifacts left behind in the desert. Jason DeLeon's The Land of Open Graves focuses on migrants who cross the U.S. Mexico border through the Sonoran Desert. The book is an example of ethnography, where the researcher immerses themselves in the culture or environment they're studying. DeLeon's primary research question asks, how does U.S. border enforcement impact migrants crossing through this dangerous landscape? His study examines the U.S. government's prevention through deterrence policy, which intentionally directs migrants into dangerous, often deadly parts of the desert. In the next few slides, we'll break down the different elements of his research, including his use of participant observation, how he deals with ethical concerns, and the significance of material culture, the objects left behind by migrants as evidence of their journey. Just want to take a moment to connect what we're learning about DeLeon's work to our own context here in New York City. So, New York City is one of the most diverse cities in the world with a large immigrant population, many of whom have faced similar struggles to those DeLeon documents in the Sonoran Desert. For those of you in counseling and schools, DeLeon's research reminds us how important it is to understand the trauma that immigrant students and their families might carry with them. Migration isn't just a physical journey, it can also be an emotional and psychological one, especially for those who have endured hardship. As counselors or teachers, it's crucial to approach these students with cultural sensitivity and empathy. For those of you in education, think about how DeLeon's work can inspire us to create more inclusive and supportive classrooms. Many students may come from immigrant backgrounds, and by understanding the challenges they face, whether directly or through their families' experiences, we can better support their learning and development. Incorporating students' backgrounds into our curricula and ensuring that they feel safe and included in the classroom is essential. So while DeLeon's research is focused on the US Mexico border, the themes of migration, trauma, and cultural sensitivity are highly relevant for us here in New York City. For those of you pursuing careers as marriage and family therapists or mental health counselors, DeLeon's work offers several key takeaways that can be applied to your future practice. First, the concept of trauma informed care is crucial. Many immigrants, like the one DeLeon describes, have endured significant trauma, whether during their migration or in adjusting to life in a new country. As counselors, it's important to be aware of how trauma, especially trauma related to migration, can manifest in individuals and families. This may include signs of PTSD, anxiety, and depression that are directly tied to the hardships faced during the migration process. Second, cultural competence is critical in working with immigrant populations. Understanding the unique cultural and social factors that affect immigrant families will help you build trust and rapport with your clients. Clients may come from backgrounds where seeking therapy is stigmatized or unfamiliar, and you'll need to approach these individuals with sensitivity and openness to their cultural values and norms. Third, the impact of migration on family dynamics is profound. Many immigrant families experience separation and reunification, which can create tension, emotional distress, and role conflicts within the family. As marriage and family therapists, you may work with families who are navigating issues related to cross cultural identities, family expectations, or the challenge of adjusting to new environments. In your work, remember that migration often affects not just the individual, but the entire family system, and supporting both individuals and families will be key to fostering resilience and healing. In addition, as we reflect on part one of The Lands of Open Graves, it's important to connect the research methods used by DeLeon with what we've been studying in 713. First, DeLeon's work is a prime example of ethnographic research, which we've discussed as a key qualitative method. He uses participant observation and immersive fieldwork to gather data in a real world setting. This relates to our exploration of qualitative methods in both education and counseling, where the researcher often observes or interacts closely with the population being studied to gather rich, detailed data. This is particularly relevant when you're studying behaviors, experiences, or systems that are best understood in context. Second, DeLeon emphasizes the importance of positionality, something we've talked about in class as well. As researchers, our own identity, background, and experiences influence how we approach research and interpret data. In your own research project, you'll need to be aware of how your positionality may shape the outcomes of your study and practice reflexivity, constantly questioning your biases and assumptions. And finally, DeLeo navigates through some tough ethical considerations. He works with vulnerable populations, which raises important questions about how to ethically document the lives of those experiencing hardship. This connects to our discussions about maintaining ethical standards in research, particularly when you're working with sensitive topics or marginalized groups. Protecting the privacy, dignity, and safety of your participants should always be a top priority. So, whether you're conducting ethnographic fieldwork, interviewing subjects, or working with data from educational settings, these principles from DeLeon's work apply directly to what we've been studying in this class. So DeLeon uses participant observation to experience the desert crossing firsthand. He immerses himself in the environment where migrants journey, gathering data through his observations. And this method allows him to collect detailed, nuanced insights that other forms of research might miss. It helps him better understand the real physical and emotional hardships that migrants endure. This form of observation also highlights the dangers of crossing the border, extreme heat, dehydration, and hostile terrain. While this immersion gives him access to these insights, it also presents ethical concerns, which we'll discuss further. DeLeon reflects on the ethical challenges of studying vulnerable populations, particularly migrants who are in life threatening situations. As a researcher, DeLeon acknowledges his privilege. He can leave the situation, but the migrants cannot. This tension creates a moral conflict. How can he ethically observe and record suffering without exploiting the individuals he's studying? He navigates this dilemma by approaching the research with empathy and striving to use his work to amplify the voices of those who often remain unheard in migration studies. Ethnographic research often requires researchers to grapple with these ethical questions, especially when the subjects are marginalized populations. Positionality refers to how a researcher's background, identity, and social status influence their research and interaction with subjects. DeLeon emphasizes that as an educated male from the United States, he had privileges and resources that the migrants did not, which affected his interactions and interpretations of their experiences. His positionality shaped how he sees the world, which is important to recognize in qualitative research like ethnography. It affects the lens through which he collects and interprets data. De Leon, his awareness of his privilege is critical because it helps him remain mindful of the potential biases that could influence his research. He uses this self awareness to approach his work with humility and respect for the migrants. Material culture refers to the objects and physical items left behind that tell the stories of those who once used them. DeLeon collects and analyzes these artifacts, abandoned backpacks, empty water bottles, torn shoes, to gain insight into the migrant experience. These objects are significant because they are physical evidence of the migrants' struggles and suffering. They reflect the dangerous journey through the desert and the scarcity of resources. Material culture is essential in ethnographic research because it allows researchers to document the lives of individuals who may no longer be present or able to tell their stories. DeLeon's work emphasizes that even the smallest objects can hold great meaning in understanding the reality of migration. Every migrant has a story, and every story is filled with heartbreak, fear, and hope. These are not just numbers or statistics, these are human beings, each with a unique history that deserves to be told. The Land of Open Graves. DeLeon focuses on humanizing the migrants' experience, making sure that their personal stories of struggle, fear, and hope are heard. By documenting individual accounts, he reminds us that these are real people whose lives are deeply affected by U.S. immigration policies. His work provides an intimate look at the emotional toll of migration. Migrants are not just nameless individuals, but people with dreams and families. DeLeon's research sheds light on the often hidden narrative of migrants and brings them to the forefront of the conversation about border policies. DeLeon's ethnographic research is critical because it reveals hidden stories that might otherwise go untold. His work highlights the ethical and emotional challenges of conducting research in such dangerous and sensitive environments. The role of material culture is particularly important in telling the stories of those who are no longer present. These objects help preserve the history and experiences of migrants. Participant observation is an essential method in this kind of research, allowing DeLeon to immerse himself in the lived realities of the people he studies. His findings reminds us of the human costs of policy decisions and the importance of understanding how these larger structures of power shape individual lives.